If you're into zombie movies, zombie books, zombie music, or zombie anything, this book is for you. It's called Zombie Hell by the international author Jeff Lynch. I happen to have a print of the cover here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read to you from this book. It's a good one. Chapter 1, On the Carpet. Karen Klein was in the middle of changing her tampon when her phone signaled a text. She sat back down on the toilet and checked the name on the screen. It was her boss, Diane Garber, asking her to come into her office as soon as possible. This was the message Karen had been dreading for a long time, causing her to avoid her supervisor at all costs. Now she was stuck and began to sweat and shake. Finishing what she came to do, she exited the stall, washed up, and left the ladies' room in a panic. She then headed down the short hall to Diane's office with her heart racing, pounding in her chest. She paused for a moment, knocked on the door, and stepped inside the room where she saw the head of Human Resources, Herman Haas, sitting to the side of Diane's desk. He was guarding some papers lying neatly in a stack in front of him. "Come on in, Karen," Diane said. She was flat, cold, and didn't crack a smile. Karen stepped over to the desk and took the only seat available. She crossed her arms and legs, taking a defensive posture, waiting for someone to speak. The other two pushed papers around and made sure Karen was comfortable before they spoke up. "Do you know why we called you here, Karen?" Diane asked. Karen shrugged her shoulders and didn't say a word, trying to hide her nerves. "As you know, you have failed to make quota again for the 4th month in a row. You were put on probation 2 months ago with the agreement you would make up the difference. And as of now, you have not." "Are you firing me?" Karen asked. "What do you think we should do?" Diane asked. "We gave you ample time to make up for lost sales." "Have you ever tried selling? Do you know what it's like to walk up to a family and ask them if they would sell their dead relative?" "We provide all sales staff adequate training." Training is one thing, but seeing the look in their eyes when you offer up cash for a body of a loved one is something different. How many salespeople do you fire a month? I can't imagine anyone stays long. What you ask us to do is insane. If it's insane, as you put it, why did you apply in the first place? If I remember correctly, you had a position in post-production. Post-production pays minimum wage. Sales can be over $100,000 a year. That's if you can convince anyone to sell. "Sales isn't for everyone, Karen," Diane replied. "Is there any chance you can give me another chance?" Karen asked. Herman spoke up. "According to my documentation, you've been given more than your share of chances. You're costing us money." "I've had some very hard cases. 2 of them were still teenagers. Can you imagine being a parent and having someone asking to buy your dead children for $10,000 each? If they would have been older or have had some prior condition maybe, but these 2 were kids. We realize you've had your share of tough cases, but we can't offer you any more chances. We can offer you a part-time position in post-production for now, and that's it," Herman replied. "Part-time?" Karen asked. "If you would have brought in more sales, we would have full-time work available. But because you failed to bring in anything new, part-time is all we can afford right now," Herman said. "Give me another chance," Karen said. She was begging. "If we were to give you another chance, we'd have to take the commission away. You would make only base pay. You could earn your commission back once you have a proven track record." "How long would that be?" 6 months. 6 months? What is base pay?" $2,000 per body, Herman replied. "I'd need to buy twice as many bodies as before just to make up the difference," Karen said. "You know, I never understood why you call it sales in the first place. I'm not selling anything. I'm buying dead bodies from families." "They're selling. It's semantics, but it means the same in the end. Yes, you are technically a buyer, not a seller." "That is my only option?" "What do you mean?" Herman asked. "Is there any other way I can make more money?" Not at this time, Herman replied. If you want to continue your job with the new stipulations, you need to sign this contract. It will be good for 6 months, when we will again review it with you. If you fail to make your quota, there will not be another chance, and you won't be allowed to work in post-production. In other words, you will be terminated. Karen looked down at the contract that Herman pushed towards her. There was a pen on top of the paper waiting for her to pick up and sign. She felt pressured, but was glad she wasn't being let go. So she picked up the pen and signed her name at the bottom of the contract and pushed it back towards Herman. Diane spoke up. I just received a message of a possible fatality at Adams County Hospital. A car crossed the center line and collided with a pickup truck. They have airlifted 3 and are sending 2 more by ambulance. Is that it? Karen asked. Yes, I'll text you any new information I get. You better get going. Since we are low on inventory, we are authorized you up to $15,000 per body for this situation. Do you understand? Karen nodded her head and headed out of the office, down the hall, and to her car. She needed to get to the hospital and make sense of what was going on before she approached the family or families with any fatalities. At the hospital, Karen exited her SUV, grabbed her work bag, and headed into the emergency ward section of the hospital. With the passage of new laws, she was allowed to be in the emergency room as long as she stayed out of the way. When she located who she thought was the nurse in charge, she headed over and tried to get her attention. What's the situation? Karen asked. The emergency room nurse looked at Karen and recognized her immediately as the vulture that hung out waiting for the dead. Karen didn't have to wear her name badge anymore since everyone there knew her and who she worked for. One dead for sure, that's all I know. The hospital staff was obligated by law to cooperate with Karen, answer her questions, and assist her with delivery of the body if needed. Sex? Age? Karen asked. Male, I think. Don't quote me on that, the emergency room nurse replied. Karen tried to walk through the polished metal doors that led back to the exam rooms, but was cut off by the nurse and stopped in her tracks. That's as far as you go. You know that, the nurse stated, as fact. Frustrated, Karen looked around for family members. She was good at picking them out. They were the ones that were usually distraught and crying. It didn't take long for her to find a group huddled together, and she approached, more confident than ever. Hi, my name is Karen Klein from Live Again, LLC. Is there someone I can speak to? The small crowd separated and looked at Karen like she was the strangest thing they'd ever seen. Still in tears, a woman replied, From where? Live Again, LLC. We repurpose the dead, Karen replied. What are you talking about? The woman asked. Repurpose the dead. Let me explain, Karen said, as she fished a flyer out of her bag. She handed the flyer to the woman and turned it to the backside. If you read there, it explains everything. No, you tell me, the woman said, wiping away a tear from her eye. Karen was hesitant. She never liked explaining the details out loud, but she needed to make a sale today, or she would never be confident again. We buy dead bodies, Karen replied with a nervous smile. What makes you think I have a dead body to sell? The woman asked. I spoke to the RN. She said there was at least one fatality. Did she say who it was? The woman asked. No, but I assumed, since you were crying, you knew him. Him? She thought it was a male. You fucking bitch, the woman shouted. How dare you come up to me and offer to buy a dead family member from me? Just then, a man from the group put his hand on Karen's arm and pulled her to the side. He shoved her away and told her to get lost. I have cash, Karen said. I am authorized up to $15,000 per body. You can't put a price on my family, the woman said. Get the hell out of here. That's $15,000 you won't have to spend on a funeral. That's money in your pocket. We pay for the service, and you walk away with money in the bank. That's a lot better than you paying off a funeral for 10 years. And what do you do with the bodies you buy? The woman asked. That's confidential, Karen replied. Once we purchase the body, it becomes the property of Live Again, LLC. So you can make a department store mannequin out of it? So me and my family can find it selling clothes in a window display? Fuck you. Get lost. I can't tell you what we do with the bodies, but I can assure you that you will never find it used in public, Karen replied. Used? That sounds so horrible, the woman said. $15,000 is a lot of money. Money you didn't have before. You get your service, you get your casket and plot. We keep the body. We even offer a replica to place in the coffin if you choose to display it. As Karen finished her last word, the emergency room RN stepped over and called her away to the side of the room. We have 2 confirmed dead, both from the car. Do you have names? Karen asked. The nurse handed Karen a slip of paper and walked away. But before she could get too far, Karen asked if the family she had been speaking to were from the family in the car. The nurse nodded yes and continued on her way. Karen took the paper and walked back to the family. She looked down at the sheet and then back up to the woman. I can offer $30,000, Karen said. It took but a second for the woman to do the math and realize 2 of her family members were now dead. Who? She asked. Karen looked down at the paper and replied, Eric and Sandy. The woman dropped to her knees and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. The same man that pushed her away before grabbed Karen by the arm and dragged her back to the nurse's station, yanking her back and forth as hard as he could. You stay the fuck away from us. Do you understand me? The man asked. He glared at Karen, letting her know he was all business. Then, with a sudden change of heart and prospect of $30,000 in cash, the man whispered, I'll sell you the bodies, but you have to let me talk to her first. Give me a chance to calm her down. What do I have to do to make this stick? Do you have a contract or something? Karen nodded her head and motioned towards her work bag. Good. Give me an hour or so. I won't take a check, so you better have a way to wire this to my bank account. That's not a problem, Karen said quietly. She looked over the man's shoulder to the woman who was now being consoled by another lady. I'll be here all day. End of chapter 1.